Alright, today we are going to talk about a project that we call Circle Gets the Square. And what we're doing with this is we are trying to show movement across the page, whether it is diagonal, whether it is from top to bottom, or is from the center going out. So real quick, we're going to look at a couple examples here. So with this one, we're showing our movement through a size change. So there are larger circles over here in the corner. As they get smaller, it moves across the page. So your eye is drawn to this because it's darker, and then we kind of move diagonally across the page that way. Similar concept with this. We have a lot of very, very small squares here. These are a little bit more spread out. And as they go across the page, they get bigger and bigger, so it's showing us that things are getting closer, because we know that things that are further away from us appear to be smaller through atmospheric perspective. With this, it's got a combination of circles and squares, which is perfectly fine. We have bigger squares filled in with some smaller circles. We have bigger circles as well, and they get smaller and smaller as they go over here and then gang up on this one lone circle that is over here. And then with this one, we are exploding out from the middle. So one of the things that we can do to emphasize our movement is to use either a darker value within the square, or to use darker lines around the outside of the circle or square like this one does. So we have one square that is exactly in the center of the page, and then it kind of explodes out with darkness, and it gets smaller as it goes out to the edges of the page. A similar concept with this. They shaded theirs in darker, and then this couple here in the center, and then just went to darker lines, and then the lines get lighter as it goes out. Helping to show that things get further away. This one is a little bit trippy. We've got one full circle, which is the only full circle or full shape on the entire page, for that matter. And then everything comes out from there. So these three arms that are here, it is the same size circle all the way around. They just did a portion of it and shifted it around the page. Something like this, it's really cool. It takes a little bit of extra work to pull it off, but it is very much doable. It kind of looks like an old Windows screensaver. We can show our movement by using a spiral. So we have the squares here that spiral around and around and around in towards the center. And similar concept with this, where our spirals come through here and they do a loop, and then they go back. We've got another one comes through here, does a loop, and then this one uses some color to help show the spiral. This one incomplete because they didn't use the entirety of the page, but it's got a very nice spiral, moves it all the way around. And then the last way we can do it is by having our large squares kind of squeeze in and pinch into the smaller shapes. So we've got really big shapes here pushing inwards to the center. Now, what we're going to do to start out with is we are going to do a very basic, very simple thumbnail. Just a rough idea as far as where you want your movement to go, because you need to have an idea as far as what you want it to look like before you start, because there's a lot of shapes that we're going to have to put on here, so you need to know where you're going to go. Now, one of the things that we want to avoid is having our shapes stack up right next to each other like these do, whether they be right next to each other side by side, or have it line up like this to where it makes one continuous line. It doesn't really help us show movement at all. We want to show our movement by having the shapes tumble or rotate through. And when we do that, we don't want to have them overlap like this to where we can see through them, because we're working with solid objects. So when you have one object here and put another one behind it, it's going to be solid. We're not going to see anything else there. So what I've got here is just a nice little loop. And for the one that I'm going to demonstrate, so we've got a little rectangle like this, and it's going to start up like this and then come down. We're just kind of showing a little bit of a wave, a little bit of an uptick at the end there. Right? Pretty straightforward. So I'm going to take this paper, I'm going to draw just kind of a real light line. I want this to be really light, so that way we can erase this when we're all said and done. Like I said, you can use just circles, you can use just squares, you can use a combination of those. For this one, I'm using just squares. So we're going to set that one aside. For the initial shape here, I'm going to go very light with my squares, and you want to vary your size and change it every so often. You don't want to use the same one all the way through, because that's not going to help your movement at all. So you can see when I get every couple, I shift down to the next smallest one. I'm going to start right where that last one left off, so I don't have any overlap, don't have to come through and erase anything, just because I want this to be nice and clean. The only thing that I want to have to erase is that initial very light line that I drew. And the amount that you overlap is entirely up to you. You don't want to overlap too much, because then you're not going to be able to see that shape that's there. But at the same time, you don't want to overlap to where you have, just a little tiny corner showing. That's not going to help you, because, well, it's just going to spread stuff out way too far. Now, a good rule of thumb for this is not to use any shape that is smaller than what your pencil will fit in. On these particular templates, that means a 6.3 mil, so I can't go any smaller than that. And then on the circle templates, I don't want to use anything smaller than the 7. And the reason for that is just when you get down really, really small, you don't really see a whole lot of it. It doesn't really help. It just kind of plugs things up. And it's going to take you a very, very long time to try and fill in with those little bitty squares or little bitty circles. Alright, so I'm just going to fill this last one out here. And this is something that it's not really difficult to do, but it can be kind of tricky to get things laid out to where it's going to show your movement well. So you have to put a little bit of thought into it, so that way it works to your advantage, and it makes the movement that you want to have. So it's like one more square here, and we'll run off the page. Alright, now just because I want to change things up a little bit, when I go in to my second row, I'm going to start here, and I'm going to use a very heavy pressure on my pencil to create a darker line. And what that's going to do, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of it when I go to do that. So I'm going to kind of make waves of a light and a dark and a light and a dark. And that'll kind of give it a little bit different look to it. Oops. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here on the other side. You have this little tiny bit there, little bit there, come up there, so that way it starts, runs off the page. Scoot this over a little bit, and just kind of work your way through. Now, as you're doing this, you want to kind of fill up the whole page to make it all work out. So I've got one here that is kind of far along. We can see I've got a very light line, got a dark line, got a dark line, got a light line, go back in with the dark. And you want to do this throughout the entirety of the whole thing. So I'm going to come in here with a light, and you just want to fill in until everything is all filled up. You can have some space in between. You don't have to have every single little circle filled in or every single little space, but you want to make sure that you use this space wisely, and your open areas are kind of left to a minimum, and just kind of work your way through. Alrighty, and so that is it for this, and then I'll put a picture up of this one when it's all finished at the end of this video. Have a good day. Happy drawing.